Hey guys, bit of a short one this. I'm going to be mainly working on the hair in this one, giving it a bit of a highlight and trying to blend it more into the skin tones on the top of her head. I'm doing that mainly the transition between her skin tones and her hair feels a bit too sharp. You can probably see what I mean on these sort of early shots where it's just sort of red straight into the skin tones. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the same colours basically that I used for the initial base coat, which is the Bloodstone from P3, and I'm also using the off-white from Vallejo Game Colour as basically the same colour as I used for the skin highlights, and mixing those two together gives a fairly nice sort of lightish tone to it. Works quite well, so we're going to go with that. Obviously, you could just dry brush this. There's enough, if you are so inclined. There's enough sort of detail within it and enough sort of distance between the high edges and the low edges that you could actually pretty much just sort of dry brush the whole thing, really. Obviously decided not to in this case, because dry brushing doesn't work for me. I do use it. It's very useful for things like fur and that kind of sort of texture. But for this kind of painting, this sort of level of painting and modelling, I want to actually sort of physically paint all of the highlights on there. So as you'll see later on, I actually paint in the leaves on this, and I actually paint in the individual leaves with the same green as I used for the dress, the Ordic Olive from P3. And on those, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back sort of off video and just check that I've sort of caught them all, as it were, and make sure I've got them all. And then in the next video I'll just do a quick highlight on them, probably sort of one or two, usually two. The leaves are big enough that you could do two sort of layers on them. There's very little actual blending going on in this. There's certainly the sort of two brush blending that I've been using on sort of the skirt and the clothes and the skin tones, mainly because they're just too small. Layering works perfectly well for this kind of thing. As you saw with the hair, I put a sort of fairly high highlight on, especially on the top of the head, and then sort of down towards the back I mixed in a slightly darker version of the highlight and basically sort of put that in as a layer, and that works quite nicely. And also the bow is actually the same colour. I used the same Bloodstone colour. So what I'm also going to do in this is actually just go in and highlight a few bits of the bow as well, because that's actually it doesn't pick up very well on the video, but it's actually made of a branch, so there's a lot of sort of veins and bits and pieces in there as well. And I'm going to sort of do a couple of highlight runs on that, sort of clean up the face a bit. I think the lights have actually sort of made the highlights a lot sharper than they actually are on the miniature. They do look sort of not quite as jarring on the miniature itself. What I might do is go back, maybe at sort of some point, go back and maybe sort of in the sort of darker recesses, sort of the sort of the hair round her neck and down her back where it's sort of going to be a lot more shadow. I'll probably go in and put either a sort of very dark brown or possibly even a black shade in there, just to sort of pick it out and basically use the sort of the ready brown as it stands, as a highlight for that area. And I had a hell of a time with the focus on this bit, trying to focus on the bow limb. It's just virtually impossible. Camera kept on insisting on focusing on the background. But essentially this is the bow's done in exactly the same way. You essentially take each of the sort of veins and highlight and raised areas and paint them in a lighter colour. Quick check, sort of looking down from above, sort of quick check to make sure that I was catching sort of all the bits that should be highlighted. And here I'm just putting a sort of extra bright highlight on top. On the original miniature, I also, the end of the bow limbs, if you remember from the previous video, I actually sort of had those in quite a lighter colour and actually blended out to the darker colour. I don't know whether I'm going to do this on this miniature. What I'll do is once I've sort of completed the majority of the painting and certainly got all the base colours in, there's obviously still her arms and the sort of the armour and the filigree bits and the arrow still to do, but once all the base colours are in, then I'll have a look at sort of whether the bow looks too plain, and then I'll think about whether to sort of blend it in. But other than that, I'm going to go back in, touch in anything